Hello and welcome to Faith Matters. This is the show where we look at Merseyside life and what's going on in Merseyside through the prism of faith and belief. My guests for today's show are Julian Raffay and Sara Doyle from Merseycare, which is the NHS Mental Health Trust. Welcome, guys. Welcome to the studio. Just introduce yourselves. I mean, I have introduced you, but just say a little bit about yourselves and your role. Julian.
I've been with Merseycare now for just over a year. Mental health chaplain and specialist chaplain research education development. So I spend quite a lot of my time doing research and for the rest developing education, working with service users and supporting a small team.
Okay, and Sara.
Yeah, I'm Sara, and I've been with Merseycare about 7 months, so still quite new to the role. And I work on the acute wards, so I work in a number of hospitals in this area, Broad Oak, Clockview and Windsor Clinic. And I'm also a curate, and I'm actually based very close to here with the St Luke's in the City team, so I'm a curate but full-time chaplain with the Trust as well.
Okay, great. So Julian, what research are you doing?
We're looking at something called co-production. It's kind of a little bit complicated, but the idea is that if I were to say to you, here Keith, here's a cup of tea.
Do I take it?
Well, I'd say here's a cup of tea, and then you discover it's got 5 sugars in it, and I thought that's what you needed. You might say, hang on here. With co-production, I say, what would you like? Would you like a drink? How would you like it? And the point I'm making is that we try to deliver services by asking people what they want from the service, rather than assuming at the outset we know exactly what they need. Here's your service, like it or lump it. If it doesn't fit, well, tough luck, because this is what's on offer.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
And are you involved with this at all, Sara?
Not as much as Julian, that's what Julian's role is, but I obviously feed into that. And I'm hoping maybe to support Julian offering some training for churches, and also I encourage the people who use our service to actually engage with the research, to actually say it's about what you want, it isn't about what we think you want. So I suppose I do slightly do, but hopefully that'll be developed over time.
Okay, so Julian, what exactly is chaplaincy? Because many of our viewers won't really know what chaplaincy is, perhaps. Tell us what chaplaincy is and how it differs from sort of parish-based, community, neighbourhood-based ministry.
In a parish, what most people think of is a vicar or a priest. They've got a church, they've got a congregation, and they work with and beyond that congregation, and they seek to build that church and community as it serves the wider community. A chaplain works in an organisation like Merseycare. There's chaplains to the police, there's chaplains in schools and all around the place. So a chaplain doesn't have a church as such, and they may or may not have a community that they work with as such, but they seek to support people who are part of that service, part of that institution. So for instance, a mental health chaplain will seek to give support to people with mental health problems, carers, and to staff as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, yeah. And do you have chapels at all? Or?
We have in Merseycare what we call sacred spaces. So they're multi-denominational and they're multi-faith, but they are places that people can use for prayer. We do, those of us who are Christians, provide Christian services in those multi-faith spaces. Yeah.
Okay, great. So, Sara, what was it that led you into mental health chaplaincy? Is it a calling within a calling, as it were?
Yeah, I think, and it's possibly a calling I wasn't fully aware of. For a long time, I've worked with a Whitechapel, which is another charity within the city, working on homelessness housing, and I was very passionate about that. And then I got called.
So that was your job?
That was my job, yeah. And then I felt God called me to be ordained as a priest, and always feeling possibly was parish the way to go. And then through my work at Whitechapel, I just sort of felt I was taken on a different path. And I was very passionate about, I say, homelessness, dual diagnosis, drug and alcohol, mental health. And then I had my own episode of mental health. I had a breakdown which profoundly shaped my ongoing journey and changed me. And I became very passionate about mental health, and I sort of felt that God was then calling me to use my own experience, my experience at Whitechapel, my work, my own lived experience. And I saw this position of a chaplain, and I often feel it's like the Cinderella shoe fitted at long last, because I often wrestled with my calling as a priest and where I would fit, and possibly the parish model, as I thought and reflected, didn't fit that. So I think you were saying about for me, I look at the hospitals that I work in, and I sort of move in and amongst really, is like my parish in a way, that God has given me this community of people, which is constantly changing, to care for the spiritual needs of the people.
It's a bit like that John Wesley quote, isn't it? The world is my parish.
Yeah. And so I feel very thankful, but I do believe it's my own lived experience that really was quite key. And I think you were talking about the co-production, about actually having been a patient, I'm able to actually see what it's like on the other side.
And do you share that with clients and with service users, patients?
Yeah, I think I'm wise in how I share that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's something I would just, but I think I'm also quite open. We freely talk about physical health. You know, if someone had broken a toe, we'd say, oh, I broke my toe. So I am wise in how I do that. But I do share that. And I think sometimes this sense of journeying together, I think that patients really feel, they appreciate that. You know, I'm not there to look after or do to, we journey together.
It's a ministry among, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's that sort of being amongst, yeah.
One thing that might be worth saying is that, I don't know about you, Sarah, I suspect it's the case, but most of us spend at least half our time with people who wouldn't call themselves Christians.
Yeah.
So it's not simply within a particular group within the population, but whoever wants to use our services is welcome to come alongside and get involved.
Yeah. Because I find when a lot of the, one particular hospital, we do a community service every week, and it's very open, and people with faith, no faith, and I'm happy to journey with anybody, and everybody's welcome, and it's a really inclusive space and place for people.
And you're finding that people respond?
Yeah, definitely. I think people are, quite often within mental health, people will maybe look outside themselves, and it's a real time of, for some people, quite a spiritual awakening, really.
Yeah.
I quite often sort of hear people say to me, I'm suddenly starting to see that there's got to be something other than this, but they're maybe not able to sort of put it into words, and hopefully we can enable people to connect with that spiritual side. Yeah.
Somebody talked about mental breakthrough as opposed to mental breakdown.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, Julian, what's your story? What's your backstory that led you into this?
I did a degree in psychology with management science. I then got a job in mental health, and then as a social worker, which I did for a year. I wasn't qualified, but actually that's only part of the story, because the other part of the story is I had my own problems as well.
Yeah. Okay.
As an adolescent, a whole range of problems. I should almost certainly have used mental health services. For one reason or another, I didn't get round to it.
Yeah.
Somehow survived. More recently, I've had panic attacks. Well, that's about 10 years ago now. But, you know, my own episode, my own experiences. And actually, I think there's something very valuable, and really hope that staff find the courage and the confidence as appropriate to be honest. And perhaps if we can all be honest, as Sara says, like the broken leg, stigma is the biggest single burden that most people face. Yeah.
Because, the statistics show that at least 1 in 4 people in their lifetime, probably 1 in 3, is that the right?
I
would say that we all have fluctuating mental health.
Yeah.
We have good days when we're on form, we're up for it, we're buzzing, we're excited, and other days when actually just getting up in the morning is too much. So nobody has perfect mental health.
In the same way as that none of us have perfect physical health.
No.
And you know, in a way, the message of the gospel is that none of us are whole.
No.
The message of
in
the
that.
gospel is extremely interesting because it is all have fallen short. There is none who is perfect, not one.
Yeah.
We've all got problems.
I think that's what really underpins my work a lot, is that this sense of that, you know, looking at each individual person and seeing who they were fully meant to be. You're trying to help people to see that, and to value who they are as people. Not what they do, what they have been labelled with, but actually to see a person, a human being, created in the image of God. And to try and hold that person. And, you know, we meet a lot of people through our work, and I often think it's a bit like, I say to people, it's a bit like we're going across a stream. I'm on this stone with you for now, and I'm going to pass you over, and you move on to the next part of your journey. But the journey is about trying to help people to be who they are, to be valued, and to love the person, and to listen to the person. As you were saying about, you know, quite often we can think we know in the church, you know, in other areas what people need, but actually saying what can we offer to you? How can we be of help on you in this journey? And I think just giving people time and space, and just to saying to people, who are you? And I think people really open up to that question, because possibly sometimes people have never thought, actually, who are they?
Well, thanks, Sara, and thanks to Julian. We're now going to cut to our commercial break and see you after the break. Welcome back to Faith Matters. We'd love to hear from our viewers on suggestions for future programmes. So please email us at faithmatters@baytvliverpool.com. We'd just love to hear from you and any ideas you have for future programmes. Welcome back to our guests today, Julian and Sara from Mersey Care, chaplains. You're both Christian ministers working within Mersey Care, working within mental health services, and you're representatives in that sense of the ministry of Jesus, you know, here on earth, the resurrected ministry of Jesus. If it's not too theological a question, what does the ministry of Jesus have to offer to people living and suffering with mental health conditions? Julian.
First of all, Jesus came among people that others looked down upon and showed them love. And one of the things that is at the heart of the Christian message, as I understand it, is that all are loved by Jesus. And that love is there for those whom others may choose not to love, and for those who struggle to love themselves.
Okay.
And it's a message of hope. Because if we basically understand ourselves to be loved, actually pretty well all the rest flows out of that. So it's a message of hope for the individual, but it's also a message of finding and sharing forgiveness, a message that builds up community, that actually is to say there are more important things than what you have, what you own, what car you drive, and all that sort of stuff.
More important things than the material.
Absolutely, yeah. And that we are all in this together. We are human beings sharing a planet, and we might as well make the best of it together. People with mental health problems and people who consider themselves to be well. One of the really important things for me is that being alongside people with mental health problems helps me to be more honest about issues within my own emotional experience day by day. And often the people I work with support and encourage and inspire me as much as I see myself as supporting and inspiring them. But somehow it's a two-way process of encouragement and sharing and finding hope.
That's interesting. Many years ago, I worked with young adults with learning difficulties, and I remember being taught, you know, in my induction, that the person doing the induction said, "You will learn more from the people that you're working with then perhaps they may learn from you. And there's a humility in that, isn't
Yeah,
there?
definitely.
One of the people who taught me most is a man, I'll call him Brian, who had no ability to speak and very little ability to do anything else. And that man actually taught me the world. And, you know, you could just engage with him and then somehow your world was changed. Truly extraordinary.
You got anything to add to that?
Yeah,
Sara?
I think for me, I always get this great sense that Jesus came that people might have life and life to the full. And that will be different for every person. But I suppose for me, it's that sense that it isn't about what you own or about what you have, what you do. It's about who you are. And I hope that when I work or journey with people, that it's about trying to sort of share that. It's about who you are as a person, that you're loved, you're valued. And I think also for me, there's a sense of justice. There's lots of issues around justice for people. That there are people who are marginalised through maybe mental health, dual diagnosis, drug, alcohol, and that everybody has something to give. And we've all had different journeys that have brought us to places. And I would hope that I can encourage people to say that you are who you are. And it's trying to sort of look at what people have. And I think people often think they've got nothing to offer. Or people with mental health, that there's no hope, there's no light at the end of the tunnel. And I would hope that somehow I can offer a gospel of hope, of value, of justice, which I believe that all the key things that Jesus stood for. And I think with Jesus, you know, Jesus kept it real.
Yeah.
And I hope I keep it real.
Yeah.
You know, I think sometimes people think because you wear this thing, you know, you can easily do that. And I do that often with a patient, just say, look, I'm just a human being and let's keep this real because Jesus was real. Jesus was edgy. Jesus spent time with people that you said that, you know, other people would not. And so to me, it's that gospel of hope and gospel of being real and a gospel of justice. And I hope that's what I try and share
There's
with
something
people.
about the what has been called the upside down kingdom, which has been said to me is the right way up kingdom, actually. That Jesus said, didn't he, the first will be last and the last will be first. And it's the kind of inverse of the world. And I also think that there are a lot of myths around in society now, the kind of myth of the easy life, that we can have an easy life and we're affected by the whole celebrity culture, and the myth of perfectionism, that somehow we can attain to these sort of perfected forms as human beings. And maybe it's about busting those myths. But what do you think?
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think for me, a key thing is that with Jesus, there's a mystery. There is that mystery, like, you know, life isn't this sort of happy, harmonious. It can be quite tough life, and it can be quite a difficult journey. And as you say, sometimes you want it to be happy and fluffy and nice, and sometimes that isn't a reality.
And sometimes I think the church buys into this, doesn't
Yeah, and I think I was thinking about just this Easter, I spoke about how driving to church, I'd seen a man who was obviously unwell, homeless, in the rain, sleeping. And within an hour, I'd seen a beautiful bird.
Yeah.
And for me, that is the cross and the resurrection, this sort of sense of hopelessness and hope, that somehow, I think in the work that we do, we carry these two things together.
Yeah.
And that is the mystery of God.
And
that
we
is
all,
the mystery
in fact, all humanity lives with this paradox, really.
And I think you see that with people with mental health, you know, that life may never be this perfect. What does that mean?
Yeah.
But actually, how do people manage their mental health? How can we enable people to be real about that? Rather than, you know, so you're going to go off and everything's going to be fine, because possibly that might not be the case. So I think for me, Jesus was in the game of, you know, realism, you know,
One of the most beautiful things I encounter is the way that people care for each other on the wards. I remember once, I'm a keen hill walker, and I went walking and I kind of smashed up my face and it was all just a mess. And I came onto the ward and sat down next to a woman, just doing my normal job because there's no reason why not. And she said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, you get bashed up too, do you?"
That's quite profound. That's quite a deep thing.
Deeply
Yeah.
moving.
Yeah.
I will not forget the care and the tenderness with which that woman treated me. And they look after each other. You know, more often than not, the service uses the patients on the wards in that kind of way.
So tell us, Julian, tell us what the local church can do. What can the local church, I mean, many of our viewers will be from local churches or local faith communities. What can people do in that local context to help people that are struggling with these kind of issues among them and in the wider community?
The first thing is be real with people.
Yeah.
Simply because someone has a mental health problem doesn't actually make them any different from anyone else. They are a human being. Talk to them about the things you might talk to someone else about. Listen to them, give them time, give them space. Don't be afraid. The reality is that most people with mental health problems are far more likely to be assaulted by another person than to do harm to anyone else. So nothing to be afraid of, probably. Churches offer communities of continuing care and support. Mental health workers come and go as they get promotions and get redeployed. Churches are there, and other faith communities as well, are there and continue to be there for people. The humble coffee morning or luncheon club can be a real place, or a lifeline, a place of hope, where somebody can actually find the courage, find the skill, not to actually spend all their day in their house waiting for the community psychiatric nurse to come in 2 weeks' time. It may be the only person they see.
I think on the back of that, I think that's something I'm quite passionate about, is there's two things the churches could offer. Is that, I know when I was poorly, that they gave my husband real support, things like cleaning, doing the shopping. People would come in when I was really just so poorly on the settee, I couldn't speak, couldn't function, to give my husband respite. There was real practical things.
Thank you for that. We're coming to the end of the
Oh,
programme
that's it,
now.
right.
It's just been great, and people can contact you through the Mersey Care website, volunteer, get involved.
Absolutely, we're always looking for volunteers.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. It's just such an animated conversation, and see you next time for Faith Matters.
Thank you.